In a world where royal protocol dictates every breath, every step, and every gesture, what happens when tradition becomes the most powerful form of rebellion? When Princess stepped onto the red carpet that crisp autumn morning, no one expected that her simple act of respect would ignite a global conversation about duty, family, and the weight of a crown. The cameras were rolling, the world was watching, and in that moment, a series of curtsies would reveal more about the human heart behind royal walls than any interview ever could. This is not just a story about protocol. It's about a woman who found a way to speak volumes without saying a single word, proving that sometimes the most profound statements are made in silence. What happened next would forever change how the world viewed not just Princess but the very essence of what it means to serve with grace under the most unforgiving spotlight on earth. The morning sun cast long shadows across the cobblestones of Windsor Castle as Princess stood before her bedroom window, watching the early preparations unfold below. Staff members moved with practiced precision, arranging flowers, positioning barriers, and checking security measures for what would become one of the most talked-about royal welcomes in recent memory. She had no idea that within hours, her actions would be dissected by millions around the world, frame by frame, curtsy by curtsy. And had always been different from her siblings, where Charles carried the weight of future kingship with careful deliberation, and Andrew and Edward navigated their roles with varying degrees of comfort, and had forged her own path through the maze of royal expectations. She was known for her no-nonsense approach, her dedication to her hundreds of patronages, and her ability to connect with people from all walks of life without the artificial barriers that often separated royalty from reality. This particular morning held special significance. The visiting delegation included representatives from several Commonwealth nations, dignitaries from European monarchies, and, most importantly, members of her own extended family whom she rarely saw due to their busy schedules and geographic distances. The protocol department had spent weeks coordinating the precise choreography of greetings, ensuring that each gesture would reflect the appropriate level of respect and maintain diplomatic harmony. As Anne reviewed her schedule one final time, she noticed something that others might have overlooked. The guest list included her elderly aunt, Princess Margaret's former lady-in-waiting, who had served the royal family for over 50 years and was now in her 90s. There was also her cousin from Denmark, who had recently recovered from serious illness, and the Commonwealth representative from Jamaica, whose grandmother had served as a nurse during World War II and had once treated wounded soldiers alongside his own grandfather. These were not just names on a diplomatic roster. These were people with stories, with histories intertwined with her own family's legacy, with personal struggles and triumphs that extended far beyond their official titles. As Anne fastened the pearl brooch that had belonged to her grandmother, she made a decision that would surprise everyone present, including herself. The Princess Royal had always understood that royal protocol served a purpose beyond mere ceremony. Each bow, each curtsy, each carefully timed gesture carried the weight of centuries of tradition and the promise of respect between nations and peoples. But that morning, she realized that protocol could also be a language of the heart, a way to honor not just positions and titles, but the human beings who carried them. Her personal assistant knocked gently on the door, announcing that it was time to dress for the ceremony, and had already selected her outfit carefully. A deep navy ensemble that would photograph well, but not overshadow the importance of the visitors, with modest heels that would allow her to move gracefully through the elaborate greetings that lay ahead. Her jewelry was deliberately understated, chosen more for its sentimental value than its monetary worth. As she made her way through the castle corridors and past portraits of her ancestors, each one a reminder of the countless royal welcomes that had taken place within these walls. Queen Victoria had greeted foreign dignitaries here, as had her great-great-grandmother Queen Mary, her grandmother Queen Elizabeth, and her own mother. Each generation had faced the challenge of balancing personal authenticity with public duty, of finding ways to be genuinely human while fulfilling roles that often seemed to demand superhuman composure. The castle's staff had outdone themselves with the preparations. Fresh flowers from the royal gardens created a pathway of color and fragrance, while the red carpet had been positioned with mathematical precision. Security personnel, dressed in formal attire that allowed them to blend seamlessly with the diplomatic crowd, had taken their positions hours earlier. The media area buzzed with activity as photographers and cameramen prepared their equipment, each hoping to capture the perfect moment that would grace tomorrow's front pages. What none of them expected was that Princess and herself would provide that perfect moment, not through any grand gesture or dramatic speech, but through a series of simple acts that would remind the world why genuine respect never goes out of style. She had no script for what would happen next, no predetermined plan beyond following her instincts and honoring the people who had chosen to spend their valuable time attending this ceremony. As the first guests began to arrive and took her position at the entrance, flanking the main receiving area where her mother would soon join her. The autumn air was crisp but not uncomfortable, and a gentle breeze carried the sounds of London traffic from beyond the castle walls, a reminder that outside these ancient stones, ordinary life continued its steady rhythm. The Princess Royal watched as each guest emerged from their vehicles, noting the careful attention paid to their appearance, the nervous adjustments of formal wear, and the mixture of excitement and apprehension that crossed their faces. These were accomplished individuals, leaders in their own right, yet stepping into the formal atmosphere of a royal welcome clearly affected each of them differently. Her elderly aunt's former colleague moved slowly but with dignity, assisted by a walking stick and accompanied by a younger relative who had driven her from her retirement home specifically for this occasion. The Danish cousin appeared thinner than and remembered, but his smile was warm and genuine as he greeted the staff members who welcomed him. The Jamaican representative carried herself with the quiet strength that and had come to associate with women who had overcome significant challenges to reach positions of influence and respect. As the ceremony was about to begin, and felt a moment of clarity about what truly mattered in these formal gatherings. Beyond the diplomatic necessity and media attention, beyond the careful adherence to centuries-old protocols, there remained the simple human reality of people coming together to acknowledge their shared connections and mutual respect. The Queen arrived precisely on schedule, her presence immediately elevating the atmosphere from formal to truly regal. Mother and daughter exchanged a brief smile, a private moment of connection that spoke volumes about their relationship and their shared understanding of the responsibilities they carried. Together, they would welcome these special guests, and had already decided that her approach would be guided by something deeper than the written protocols in her briefing folder. Standing beside her mother, Princess, and prepared to demonstrate that sometimes the most powerful way to honor tradition is to infuse it with genuine human warmth and individual recognition. The cameras began rolling, the guests moved into position, and history prepared to witness a lesson in the art of graceful leadership that would be remembered long after the formal photographs were filed away in royal archives. The scene was set for what would become a masterclass in using protocol as a vehicle for authentic human connection, proving that even the most formal occasions could be transformed by sincerity and thoughtful attention to the people behind the titles. Princess and was about to show the world that being royal did not require being remote, and that the highest form of respect often comes in the quietest gestures. The moment arrived with the kind of hushed anticipation that only accompanies truly significant occasions. As the first distinguished guest approached the receiving line, Princess and felt the familiar weight of countless eyes upon her. Photographers had positioned themselves strategically to capture every angle, while television cameras broadcast the scene live to millions of viewers around the world. What happened next would be replayed, analyzed, and discussed for days to come, though at the time, and was thinking only of the woman walking toward her with careful, measured steps. Lady Eleanor Whitmore, the 93-year-old former lady-in-waiting who had served Princess Margaret for over 5 decades, moved with the dignity that comes only from a lifetime of grace under pressure. Her silver hair was perfectly styled beneath a small hat adorned with a simple feather, and her navy dress spoke of understated elegance from an era when such things were crafted to last generations rather than seasons. But it was her eyes that caught Anne's attention, bright, alert, and carrying the accumulated wisdom of someone who had witnessed history from the inside. According to protocol, Lady Eleanor should have curtsied to Princess and as the daughter of the reigning monarch. The depth and duration of the curtsy would have been precisely calculated based on their relative positions within the royal hierarchy, a choreographed moment that honored centuries of tradition. Instead, something extraordinary happened that no protocol manual had ever anticipated or could have prescribed. As Lady Eleanor approached, Princess and saw not just a former member of the royal household, but a woman who had dedicated her entire adult life to serving the monarchy with unwavering loyalty. She had been present during some of the most challenging moments in recent royal history, providing support and stability during personal crises that never made their way into official records. She had sacrificed opportunities for her own family and career to ensure that Princess Margaret could fulfill her duties with confidence and grace, without hesitation. And to the surprise of everyone present, including Lady Eleanor herself, Princess Anne stepped forward and executed a deep, reverent curtsy that lasted several seconds longer than any protocol would have required. It was not the brief acknowledgement that one might expect between a princess and a former staff member, but rather the profound bow of someone recognizing exceptional service and personal sacrifice. The gesture sent ripples through the assembled crowd. Photographers trained to capture fleeting moments found themselves scrambling to document something they had never seen before. A senior member of the royal family making such a deliberate and profound gesture of respect to someone who, in the traditional hierarchy, would be considered her social inferior. The cameras clicked frantically, but the sound seemed muffled by the collective intake of breath from those close enough to witness the moment firsthand. Lady Eleanor's reaction was immediate and deeply moving. Her carefully maintained composure wavered for just an instant as tears formed in her eyes. She had expected a brief acknowledgement, perhaps a warm word or two about her years of service. Instead, she found herself on the receiving end of a gesture that honored not just her official role, but her humanity, her dedication, and the personal cost of a lifetime spent in service to others. The curtsy lasted only moments, but its impact reverberated through the gathering like a stone thrown into still water. Other guests, initially focused on their own upcoming interactions with royalty, found themselves reconsidering what they were witnessing. This was not merely a formal ceremony following predetermined scripts, but something far more meaningful, a demonstration of genuine respect and recognition. As Princess Anne rose from her curtsy, she took Lady Eleanor's gloved hands in her own, a breach of protocol that somehow felt entirely appropriate. The two women exchanged a few quiet words, their conversation private despite the public setting. Later, lip readers would speculate about what was said, but those present could see that whatever passed between them was deeply personal and profoundly meaningful to both women. The Queen, standing nearby, watched her daughter's actions with what observers later described as a mixture of surprise and approval. She had raised and to understand the importance of protocol while never forgetting the people behind the titles and positions. Seeing her daughter demonstrate such thoughtful leadership and genuine human connection clearly moved her, though she maintained the composed expression that had served her well through decades of public appearances. Word of what had just occurred spread through the gathering with remarkable speed. Guests who had been chatting quietly among themselves fell silent, their attention now completely focused on the receiving line and wondering what might happen next. The media representatives, initially prepared to file routine reports about another royal ceremony, suddenly realized they were witnessing something that would require entirely different coverage. But Princess Anne was far from finished. Her interaction with Lady Eleanor had not been a spontaneous moment that she would quickly return from to resume normal protocol. Instead, it had crystallized something that had been forming in her mind throughout the morning. A decision to use this ceremony as an opportunity to demonstrate the values that she believed should define modern royalty. As the next guest approached, Prince Henrik of Denmark, Anne's second cousin who was still recovering from his recent illness, she prepared to continue what she had started. Henrik moved more slowly than he once had, his steps careful and deliberate as he made his way down the red carpet. He had specifically requested to attend this ceremony despite his doctor's concerns, driven by his respect for the British royal family and his desire to maintain the personal connections that had sustained him through his health challenges. Princess and could see the effort it had taken for Henrik to be present that day. His formal uniform, while immaculate, hung slightly loose on his frame, and she noticed the way he paused periodically to steady himself. This was a man who had once been known for his athletic prowess and energetic approach to his royal duties, now facing the humbling realities of aging and illness with as much grace as he could muster. When Henrik reached the receiving line, the gathered crowd watched with heightened attention to see how Princess Anne would greet her cousin. The moment carried additional weight because of what had just occurred with Lady Eleanor, and because Henrik's own royal status meant that the protocol considerations were different and more complex. Once again, Princess Anne made a choice that surprised everyone present. Rather than the formal acknowledgement that protocol might have suggested for greeting a cousin of equal royal status, she offered another curtsy, this one acknowledging not his title or position in any royal hierarchy, but his courage in attending despite his health challenges and his commitment to maintaining family relationships even when personal circumstances made such commitments difficult. This second curtsy was different from the first, tailored to the specific individual and circumstances, but equally meaningful in its sincerity and depth. It spoke to Henrik's personal journey, his resilience, and the respect that Anne felt he deserved for choosing to be present when it would have been easier and perhaps wiser to stay home and focus on his recovery. Henrik's response was immediate and visible. The effort of maintaining formal composure while dealing with his physical limitations had been evident in his approach, but Anne's gesture of recognition and respect seemed to provide him with an emotional strength that translated into physical presence. He stood a little straighter, smiled more genuinely, and their subsequent conversation carried the warmth of family members who truly care about each other's well-being. The pattern was becoming clear to those observing the ceremony. This was not a random deviation from protocol, but a thoughtful and deliberate approach to using formal occasions as opportunities for genuine human connection and recognition. Princess Anne was demonstrating that protocol could be a language of respect rather than just a set of rigid rules, and that true leadership often meant recognizing the extraordinary within what might appear ordinary to casual observers. As the ceremony continued, anticipation built among the remaining guests and observers. Each person waiting to be greeted found themselves wondering not just how they would be received, but how Princess Anne would find ways to acknowledge their individual stories and contributions. The atmosphere had shifted from formal ceremony to something far more personal and meaningful, setting the stage for what would become an unforgettable lesson in the power of authentic leadership and genuine human respect. The third guest to approach the receiving line carried with her a story that would test Princess Anne's ability to transform formal protocol into deeply personal recognition. Dr. Marva Campbell, the Commonwealth representative from Jamaica, walked with the confident stride of someone who had overcome significant obstacles to reach her position of influence and respect. At 68, she was the granddaughter of a woman who had served as a nurse during World War II, treating wounded soldiers in field hospitals across the Caribbean and later in England itself. Dr. Campbell's presence at the ceremony represented more than diplomatic courtesy. Her grandmother, Nurse Violet Campbell, had been one of hundreds of Caribbean women who had volunteered to serve in British military hospitals during the war, leaving behind their families and familiar surroundings to provide care and comfort to soldiers from around the world. These women had worked long hours in difficult conditions, often facing prejudice and discrimination, yet maintaining their dedication to healing and service. Princess knew Dr. Campbell's family history because she had made it her business to learn about each guest's background before the ceremony. This was not information provided in the standard briefing materials, but details she had requested specifically because she believed that understanding people's personal stories was essential to honoring them appropriately. The research had revealed connections between Dr. Campbell's family and the royal family's own history that few people knew existed. During the war, Nurse Violet Campbell had been stationed at a military hospital where she had treated several members of the royal household staff who had been injured during the London Blitz. She had worked alongside Princess Anne's own grandmother's medical team, sharing the dangers and responsibilities of wartime service. After the war, she had returned to Jamaica, where she had continued her nursing career and raised a family that included Dr. Campbell's mother, who had become a teacher, and eventually Dr. Campbell herself, who had earned a doctorate in education and dedicated her career to improving healthcare access in underserved communities. As Dr. Campbell approached, Princess Anne could see traces of her grandmother's strength and determination in her bearing. Here was a woman who had inherited not just family stories, but a legacy of service and sacrifice that connected her directly to some of the most challenging periods in British and Commonwealth history. The formal titles and diplomatic protocols seemed almost inadequate to acknowledge the depth of that connection and the significance of her family's contributions. When Dr. Campbell reached the receiving line, she prepared to offer the standard greeting that protocol required for a Commonwealth representative meeting a member of the British royal family. She had attended similar ceremonies before and understood exactly what was expected of her. What she did not expect was what Princess Anne did next. For the third time that morning, Princess Anne chose to honor someone not with the standard acknowledgement that protocol required, but with a curtsy that spoke directly to Dr. Campbell's family legacy and personal achievements. This curtsy was deeper and more lingering than even the previous ones, acknowledging not just Dr. Campbell herself, but her grandmother's service, her family's sacrifices, and the ongoing commitment to service that connected their two families across generations and continents. The gesture had an immediate and profound impact on Dr. Campbell, who later described the moment as one of the most meaningful of her professional life. She had attended countless official functions and received numerous honors for her work, but nothing had prepared her for this level of personal recognition from someone she had never met, but who had clearly taken the time to understand and value her family's story. The curtsy also resonated powerfully with the other Commonwealth representatives present, many of whom carried similar family histories of service and sacrifice that often went unrecognized in formal diplomatic settings. They watched Princess Anne's gesture with a mixture of surprise and appreciation, seeing in it an acknowledgement of their own country's contributions to shared history and ongoing partnership. But perhaps the most significant impact was on the growing audience of media and public observers who were beginning to understand that they were witnessing something extraordinary. Social media began buzzing with real-time reactions to the ceremony, as people around the world shared their thoughts on what they were seeing. The hashtag Royal Respect began trending as users posted about Princess Anne's gestures and what they meant for modern understanding of royal duty and leadership. The fourth guest to approach the receiving line was Lieutenant Colonel James Morrison, a military veteran who had served in several international peacekeeping missions and was now involved in veteran support services. His invitation to the ceremony had come in recognition of his work helping former service members transition to civilian life, particularly those dealing with physical injuries or post-traumatic stress disorders. Colonel Morrison carried himself with the bearing of someone accustomed to military precision, and noticed the slight hesitation in his left leg, a reminder of an injury sustained during his service. She also knew from her research that he had recently lost his wife to cancer and was raising his teenage daughter alone while maintaining his demanding work schedule and community commitments. As he approached and realized that Colonel Morrison represented something that was particularly close to her heart, the often unseen challenges faced by those who serve their countries and communities at personal cost. Her own military background and her extensive work with military charities had given her deep appreciation for the sacrifices made by service members and their families, sacrifices that often continued long after their official duties had ended. When Colonel Morrison reached the receiving line, he snapped to attention with automatic military precision, preparing to offer a formal salute that would have been entirely appropriate given his background and the setting. Instead, Princess stepped forward and offered him a curtsy that acknowledged not just his military service, but his ongoing commitment to helping others and his personal courage in facing recent personal losses while maintaining his dedication to public service. This fourth curtsy was different again from the previous three, tailored specifically to Colonel Morrison's experiences and current circumstances. It recognized the particular challenges faced by military families and the often overlooked difficulties of transitioning from active service to civilian leadership roles. For a moment, the formal ceremony became deeply personal, as one person who understood service and sacrifice acknowledged another who had dedicated his life to the same principles. Colonel Morrison's response was immediate and visible. The military bearing remained, but his eyes reflected surprise and genuine emotion at being recognized not just for his official achievements, but for his personal journey and ongoing commitments. Their subsequent conversation, though brief, carried the warmth of shared understanding between people who had both experienced the challenges and rewards of a life dedicated to service. By now, the pattern of Princess Anne's approach was clear to everyone present, but its impact was growing rather than diminishing with each interaction. The remaining guests found themselves reconsidering their own expectations for the ceremony. While the media coverage was evolving from routine diplomatic reporting to something approaching social commentary on the nature of respect, recognition, and authentic leadership. The Queen, continuing to observe her daughter's actions, displayed what courtiers later described as quiet pride mixed with admiration. She had always known that and possessed strong instinct for connecting with people, but watching her transform a formal ceremony into a series of deeply meaningful personal recognitions demonstrated a level of emotional intelligence and leadership that went beyond anything that could be taught or scripted. As the ceremony moved towards climax, with two more guests waiting to be received, the assembled crowd realized they were witnessing something that would be remembered long after the formal photographs were archived and the official reports were filed. Princess Anne was demonstrating that the highest levels of public service could be both deeply formal and genuinely personal, proving that protocol and authentic human connection were not competing values, but could be combined to create moments of extraordinary meaning and impact. The stage was set for the final acts of what had already become a masterclass in graceful leadership, thoughtful recognition, and the power of using traditional forms to express thoroughly modern values of respect, inclusion, and genuine appreciation for the diverse ways that people contribute to their communities and countries. The fifth guest approaching the receiving line carried with her a story that would prove to be one of the most challenging tests of Princess Anne's ability to balance protocol with personal recognition. Mrs. Sarah Chun, a 74-year-old community leader from Hong Kong, walked with the careful dignity of someone who had weathered significant political and personal storms while maintaining her commitment to public service and community development. Mrs. Chin's invitation to the ceremony had come in recognition of her 40 years of work in education and social services, but her story was more complex and politically sensitive than those of the previous guests. She had lived through the transition of Hong Kong from British colonial rule to Chinese administration, navigating the changing political landscape while trying to maintain her focus on helping disadvantaged children and families. Her work had sometimes put her at odds with various political authorities, requiring her to find ways to continue serving her community while avoiding actions that might be seen as provocative by any of the competing political interests. Princess Anne was acutely aware that Mrs. Chen's presence at the ceremony carried diplomatic implications that extended far beyond personal recognition. The relationship between Britain and China regarding Hong Kong remained sensitive, and any gesture that could be interpreted as political commentary might have consequences that reached far beyond this single event. The protocol advisors had suggested that Mrs. Chen should be greeted with standard courtesy, but without any special recognition that might be misinterpreted by diplomatic observers. Yet as Mrs. Chen approached, Princess Anne saw not a political symbol or diplomatic challenge, but a woman who had dedicated her life to helping others under circumstances that required extraordinary courage and perseverance. Mrs. Chen had continued her work even when it meant facing criticism from multiple sides, maintaining her focus on the children and families who needed her services regardless of the political winds that swirled around her. The decision Princess Anne faced in that moment encapsulated everything that had made her approach to this ceremony so remarkable. She could follow the safe diplomatic path and offer Mrs. Chen the standard greeting that would avoid any potential political complications. Or she could remain true to the principle she had established with her previous gestures, that individual courage, service, and sacrifice deserved recognition regardless of the political complexities that might surround them. Without hesitation, Princess Anne stepped forward and offered Mrs. Chen a curtsy that was as deep and meaningful as any she had given that day. This gesture acknowledged not just Mrs. Chen's decades of service, but her courage in continuing that service under difficult circumstances, her commitment to helping others even when doing so required personal sacrifice and political risk. The impact of this fifth curtsy rippled through the assembled crowd with particular intensity, because everyone present understood the potential implications of the gesture. International media representatives immediately recognized that Princess Anne had chosen to honor an individual's humanitarian work over diplomatic caution, demonstrating a commitment to recognizing genuine service that transcended political considerations. Mrs. Chen's reaction was deeply emotional. She later revealed that she had attended the ceremony expecting to be received politely, but briefly, understanding that her political situation might make extended recognition inappropriate. Instead, she found herself being honored in the same way as the other guests, acknowledged not as a political figure, but as a human being who had devoted her life to helping others. The tears that formed in her eyes spoke to years of feeling isolated and misunderstood, finally receiving recognition for her humanitarian work rather than criticism for her political position. The sixth and final guest represented yet another dimension of Princess Anne's commitment to meaningful recognition. Professor David Blackwood was a 58-year-old academic who had spent his career studying the history of Commonwealth relationships and had recently completed a groundbreaking study on the positive contributions of immigrant communities to British society. His work had often challenged conventional narratives about colonialism and cultural integration, presenting research that some found uncomfortable but that had been recognized by his peers as essential to understanding modern multicultural societies. Professor Blackwood's invitation to the ceremony had been somewhat controversial within certain circles, as his academic work had sometimes been critical of historical royal and governmental policies. However, his scholarship was undeniably rigorous, and his conclusions were supported by extensive research and evidence. His presence at the ceremony represented an acknowledgement that honest historical analysis, even when it revealed uncomfortable truths, was valuable and necessary. As Professor Blackwood approached the receiving line, he carried himself with the slightly nervous energy of someone more comfortable in academic settings than formal royal ceremonies. His formal wear was impeccable, but clearly not something he wore frequently, and his expression suggested he was still somewhat surprised to find himself in this situation. Princess Anne's research into Professor Blackwood's background had revealed not just his academic achievements, but his personal story as the son of Caribbean immigrants who had worked multiple jobs to put him through school. His parents had instilled in him both pride in his heritage and commitment to educational excellence, values that had shaped his career and his approach to scholarship. His academic work on Commonwealth history had been motivated not by any desire to criticize, but by a genuine belief that understanding the full complexity of historical relationships was essential to building better future partnerships. When Professor Blackwood reached the receiving line, he prepared to offer the respectful but somewhat tentative greeting of someone who was not entirely certain how his presence would be received. What he encountered instead was Princess Anne's sixth curtsy of the day, this one acknowledging his scholarly contributions, his commitment to historical truth, and his role in helping British society better understand its complex multicultural heritage. This final curtsy carried particular significance because it demonstrated Princess Anne's willingness to honor intellectual courage and scholarly integrity, even when the work in question sometimes challenged established narratives. It showed that her approach to recognition was based not on agreement with every conclusion or comfortable acceptance of familiar ideas, but on respect for genuine commitment to truth, service, and the betterment of society. Professor Blackwood's response reflected his surprise and gratitude at being received not as a potentially controversial academic, but as someone whose work was valued and respected. The conversation that followed touched on his research and its implications for understanding modern British society, conducted with the mutual respect of two people who understood that difficult questions often led to important insights. As the formal receiving portion of the ceremony concluded, the full impact of Princess Anne's approach began to resonate through the assembled crowd and the growing global audience following the event through various media channels. 6 individuals, each with their own story of service, sacrifice, and contribution, have been honored not just with standard diplomatic courtesy, but with genuine recognition that acknowledged their individual journeys and achievements. The transformation of what might have been a routine royal ceremony into a masterclass in authentic leadership and meaningful recognition had demonstrated something important about the potential for traditional institutions to adapt and evolve while maintaining their essential dignity and purpose. Princess Anne had shown that protocol could be a language of respect rather than a barrier to genuine human connection, and that true leadership often meant finding ways to honor the extraordinary achievements of ordinary people who had chosen to dedicate their lives to serving others. The ceremony's conclusion was approaching, but its impact was just beginning to be felt as news of Princess Anne's approach spread around the world, inspiring conversations about respect, recognition, and the ways that formal occasions could be transformed into opportunities for genuine human connection and meaningful acknowledgement of individual worth and contribution. The immediate aftermath of the ceremony buzzed with an energy that no one had anticipated when the day began. As the formal receiving line concluded and guests moved toward the reception area, conversation sparked throughout the gathering that would continue long after everyone had returned to their respective homes and responsibilities. The 6 curtsies that Princess Anne had offered had transformed what might have been a forgettable diplomatic function into an unforgettable lesson in the power of authentic recognition and respectful leadership. Lady Eleanor Whitmore, still visibly moved by her interaction with Princess Anne, found herself surrounded by other guests eager to share their own experiences and reactions to what they had witnessed. Her eyes continued to shine with unshed tears as she described the princess's gesture to anyone who would listen, emphasizing not just the honor she felt at being recognized, but her admiration for Anne's ability to see beyond titles and positions to acknowledge the human stories behind them. The conversation that developed around Lady Eleanor became a focal point for discussing the broader implications of what had just occurred. Other guests shared their own observations about Princess Anne's approach, noting how each curtsy had been uniquely tailored to the individual being honored. They recognized that this level of personalized attention required not just good intentions, but careful research, genuine interest in people's stories, and the confidence to deviate from standard protocols when doing so would better serve the goal of meaningful recognition. Meanwhile, Dr. Marva Campbell from Jamaica found herself in animated discussion with several Commonwealth representatives who had witnessed her interaction with Princess, and they spoke about the significance of having their country's contributions to shared history acknowledged in such a personal and meaningful way. For many of them, formal diplomatic events often felt like exercises in maintaining relationships without necessarily celebrating the deeper connections that bound their nations together through shared struggles and common values. Dr. Campbell's experience resonated particularly strongly with representatives from other Caribbean nations, many of whom carried similar family stories of service and sacrifice that rarely received recognition in formal international settings. They discussed how Princess and Gesture had acknowledged not just Dr. Campbell's personal achievements, but the broader contributions of Caribbean peoples to Commonwealth history, from military service during wartime to ongoing partnerships in education, healthcare, and social development. The impact on Professor David Blackwood was perhaps the most surprising to observers who knew his typically reserved academic demeanor. Colleagues who had worked with him for years had rarely seen him display such obvious emotion, yet his interaction with Princess had clearly affected him deeply. He found himself in conversation with other academics and policy experts present at the ceremony, discussing the significance of having scholarly work acknowledged and respected even when it challenged conventional narratives or raised uncomfortable questions about historical relationships. Professor Blackwood's experience sparked broader discussions about the role of intellectual courage in public discourse and the importance of supporting research and scholarship that sought truth rather than comfort. Several attendees noted that Princess N's willingness to honor his work demonstrated a sophisticated understanding of the difference between academic criticism aimed at improvement and attacks intended to tear down without offering constructive alternatives. As word of the ceremony spread beyond the immediate gathering, social media platforms experienced an unprecedented surge of positive engagement around royal news. The hashtag Royal Respect continued trending globally, but it was joined by others including Grace Under Pressure, Protocol with Purpose, and Authentic Leadership. Users shared not just videos and photographs from the ceremony, but personal stories about times when they had received unexpected recognition or when someone in authority had taken the time to acknowledge their individual worth and contributions. The media coverage evolved throughout the day, from initial reports about an unusual royal ceremony to deeper analysis of what Princess Anne's approach might mean for modern leadership and public service. Political commentators found themselves discussing not partisan issues, but fundamental questions about respect, recognition, and the ways that public figures could use their platforms to honor and elevate others rather than simply maintaining their own positions and privileges. International media outlets picked up the story with particular interest in how Princess Anne's gestures had been received by guests from their respective countries. The coverage was overwhelmingly positive, with journalists and editorial writers praising her ability to transform a formal ceremony into a demonstration of genuine cross-cultural respect and appreciation for individual service and sacrifice. Back at Windsor Castle, as the reception continued, Princess Anne found herself reflecting on the day's events with a mixture of satisfaction and humility. She had not planned to create what media outlets were already calling a viral moment, or to inspire global discussions about leadership and respect. Instead, she had simply followed her instincts about how to honor people whose stories deserved recognition and whose contributions merited acknowledgement. Her conversations with guests during the reception reinforced her sense that the approach had been appropriate and meaningful. Each person she had honored with a curtsy expressed genuine appreciation not just for the gesture itself, but for the research and thought that had clearly gone into understanding their individual circumstances and contributions. They recognized that this level of personal attention required significant effort and demonstrated a commitment to seeing them as complete human beings rather than simply names on a guest list. The Queen, observing the reception from her position near the center of the gathering, watched her daughter navigate conversations with various guests, and noted the ease with which and connected with people from vastly different backgrounds and circumstances. The morning ceremony had demonstrated something that the queen had always known about her daughter, but that others sometimes overlooked, and genuine interest in people and her ability to find common ground with anyone committed to service and contribution. As the reception wound down and guests began their departures, many made special efforts to approach Princess and one final time to express their gratitude not just for the invitation, but for the way they had been welcomed and honored. These conversations, brief though they were, reinforced the connections that had been established during the formal ceremony and suggested that the relationships formed that day would continue beyond the single event. The departure process provided additional opportunities for Princess and to demonstrate her commitment to genuine recognition and respect. Rather than offering standard farewells, she took time with each departing guest to acknowledge specific aspects of their work or circumstances, ensuring that their final interaction of the day was as personalized and meaningful as their initial greeting had been. Lady Eleanor Whitmore's departure was particularly touching, as she and Princess exchanged contact information and discussed the possibility of future meetings to share more stories about royal service and family history. The 93-year-old woman left the castle with a renewed sense of the value of her lifetime of service and a deep appreciation for a younger generation of royals who understood the importance of honoring the contributions of those who had come before. As the last guest departed and the castle grounds returned to their normal quiet, Princess took a few moments to walk through the areas where the ceremony had taken place. The red carpet was being rolled up. The flowers would soon be redistributed to various locations throughout the castle, and the media equipment was being packed away. Within hours, the physical evidence of the day's events would be largely removed. But the impact of what had occurred would continue to resonate in ways that Princess was only beginning to understand. The ceremony had demonstrated that traditional forms and protocols could be vehicles for expressing thoroughly modern values of inclusivity, respect, and genuine human connection. It had shown that authentic leadership often meant taking personal risks to do what felt right rather than simply what was safe or expected. Most importantly, the day had proven that in an era of increasing cynicism about public figures and institutions, it was still possible to surprise people with genuine grace, thoughtful attention, and authentic respect for individual worth and contribution. Princess had reminded the world that the highest levels of public service were not about maintaining distance and formality, but about finding ways to honor the best in others while fulfilling one's own responsibilities with dignity and purpose. The story of Princess Anne's elaborate curtsies would be retold countless times in the days and weeks that followed, but its true significance lay not in the gesture itself, but in what it revealed about the potential for transforming routine obligations into opportunities for meaningful human connection and authentic recognition of individual worth. In a world often characterized by division and cynicism, she had demonstrated that grace, respect, and genuine appreciation for others remain powerful forces for positive change and human connection. The legacy of that autumn morning would extend far beyond the individuals who had been present to witness it, inspiring conversations about leadership, respect, and the ways that all people, regardless of their positions or circumstances, could find opportunities to honor and acknowledge the contributions of others in their daily lives and interactions.